Hi there, so if you're watching this, you've probably got some monitoring challenges, and that's probably because you've got firewalls between you and your target host. So the way we've got around that with AgileLoad is to introduce agent-based monitoring, which enables you to tunnel monitoring information across the network or across the internet, so that you don't have issues with things like monitoring Windows machines, for example. What you'll need is a remote machine to monitor, of course, admin access, because you're going to need to install AgileLoad onto that remote machine. Now the remote machine could be the server target itself if you want to put the AgileLoad agent on there. It's very lightweight. Alternatively, it could be a machine sitting in the same LAN as the server that you want to monitor. So installing AgileLoad on there, you can just use the inject only setup, which is lighter still, on this remote machine. I'd probably recommend installing the full setup, simply because if you have some issues that you need to troubleshoot, it's better to have two AgileLoad instances, one on the target machine and of course the one that you're using on your desktop. Now between you and the target machine there will probably be some firewalls, which is why you're probably needing to do this in the first place. So you need to open up port 15140 on any of the firewalls between any of the machines. So the firewall protecting your desktop, and the firewall protecting the target data center. If you've got any network address translation, then you need to set up port forwarding as well on your firewall. Okay, so now back to our application diagram. We've got our database back here, app server and web server. We've seen this before in some of the other videos. And we've got AgileLoad Center, and typically AgileLoad Center would be controlling local injectors or collectors, which could even be on the same machine or on machines in the same LAN as AgileLoad. In this case, we're going to place an AgileLoad collector remotely potentially on another LAN, in which case there might be some complex networks in between us and that machine. So what we're going to need to make this work is the external IP address of the AgileLoad collector and the internal IP address, and we're going to go through that in the video just now. So heading on over to our AgileLoad test center machine, we're going to launch a remote desktop connection to our target. So this is the machine we're going to use to do the monitoring. It might in fact be the server itself. So connecting up to that, and now we've got the desktop there, a remote desktop. Just going into the task tray, you can see that the AgileLoad Daemon is started. Right clicking and then choosing configure, you can see that we've got the listen address, the internal address, this is the custom address, and the NAT is the external address, or the public IP address in this case, because it's an Amazon EC2 server that we're using. So I don't know what that IP address is, so I'm going to choose what is my IP from Google, and there it is. So I'm just going to take that value and put it into the NAT value in the Daemon configuration console. I just click OK, and we're done here. So back at the test center machine, so your desktop, and looking in the repository, we're going to create a Windows collector, and then specify the username and password and so on that we're going to need to get permission to get the performance statistics. Now the host name is localhost. Now we're not using this machine that we're looking at now, we're using the machine that we just looked at in the remote desktop, and that's because we're going to send this template across to that remote agent to do the monitoring. I'm not going to click test connection here because I can't see that machine from here. That's why I need my external agent. So I save it, I close it, and I'm going to go down to the jobs section and create a new job. I'll call this remote Windows monitor. Double click and open it up. I cancel the box that pops up asking me to add scripts because we're not running a load test at this point, and I drag and drop in my remote server 1 Windows monitor into the collector section. I'm going to give it a friendly name. It's the operating system, so that seems like a good name to give it. And I need to tell it about the injector I'm using, so it's the remote injector, not this injector running here. That must be started and configured in a similar way with internal and external IP addresses, but it's actually this injector in fact, the IP address, the same IP address we got from Google earlier on. So I populate that, and once I've done that, I'm ready to run my job. So clicking play, it asks me to save it, so I confirm yes, and it checks the configurations and starts the job. And it opens this HTTP view window, so we'll close that because we're not doing anything with HTTP right now. This is for doing a load test. And we're going to shift across to the monitoring tab here, and we can see our Windows folder is now ready for us to take a look at. So we double click on overview and we can see CPU and memory and so on. There's nothing in there immediately because it polls every 30 seconds, and then I'm just showing you now through some of the tabs we've got relating to the technology that we're monitoring. And really the anomaly detector is something that's going to help you make sense of that. The next thing I'm going to do is add another job on the fly, a .NET collector. So it uses the same mechanism, it uses perfmon, so we still have the same issues getting information across internets. So just giving it a name in the same way that I did with the Windows collector, double clicking and opening up. I give it the host name, which again is localhost, or the internal IP address using the remote machine, and I give it the access credentials. And again, I'm not clicking test connection, I'm just going to save this, and once I've finished, I drag and drop it into my monitoring job. I'm going to give it another friendly name, application server, and start it. It then starts the job, and then if we flick across to the monitoring tab, we can now see an additional folder for .NET. Double clicking on that, we can then get information relating to the health of the .NET processors running on our remote server. If I just drag that up a little bit, you should be able to see some graphs come through once it's done its first couple of polls. So that's it. We can stop them there if you want, or stop the job. Confirm that we're going to stop it, and it pulls the results back from the remote machine, and then the monitoring tab goes empty. We move across to the results tab, and we can see our monitoring session is then stored. So of course you'd run this a lot longer, and of course in parallel with a load test. And then these results, I mentioned before the anomaly detector, there's some videos on the anomaly detector. This can help you find bottlenecks once you finish your load test. So the last thing that I want to show you is the daemon that we've got set up on here, which I'm going to right click on and choose configure, and you'll see we have the internal IP address of this machine and then the external IP address. Now I need to change this now and again because I use a dynamic IP address on this machine. I'm going to finish now with a checklist for remote monitoring. So AgileLoad on the remote machine, this can be the actual server that you want to monitor, or a machine on the same LAN as a server that you want to monitor, and then you use that machine as like a probe. The daemon must be running, and it must be configured with the internal and external IP addresses for the machine. So how does the traffic get to there, where is it routed to, that's the external IP address that goes in the NAT box, and the internal address is the same address you'll get from doing an IP config. The external address could also be a public IP address. In the case of the video, I was using an Amazon EC2 server, and I dedicated an IP address to that server, so I was able to use that from a machine on the other side of Europe. Now, AgileLoad on your machine, again, the daemon must be running, and you must see the green gazelle. It must be configured in the same way. You must have the internal and external IP addresses. The collector monitor profile must specify a local host if you're going to do this kind of monitoring running on an external injector or collector. Localhost or 127.0.0.1, it's the same thing. Some machines don't accept localhost. If not that, the internal IP address of the machine that is to be monitored. And the firewalls and routers must all be configured to allow traffic through 15140 unless you change the default to another port, for example 15141, therefore use that port. If you're using network address translation, which in most cases you will be, then the firewalls must be configured to forward external traffic arriving on port 15140 to port 15140 on the internal address, i.e. the internal address of the AgileLoad agent, the machine where AgileLoad is running. So that's it. Thanks very much for watching, and don't forget to check out the other videos, especially anomaly detection, which will tell you about how to make sense of what the monitors are telling you.